Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining our webinar today. We know how valuable your time is, so I'll try to move things along at a good pace. At the end of our webinar, a quick 3-question survey should launch. We hope you stick around for it. Your participation helps us out a lot and is greatly appreciated. We'll be breaking today's webinar into 2 parts. First, I'll give an overview of PTS and TracerPlus. Then Joe will demonstrate how easy it is to quickly create a simple TracerPlus application. During my half of the webinar, Joe will be launching 3 polls we put together. These are simple questions that, once answered, the pop-up should go away. As we move through the webinar, please type questions and comments into the question panel provided, and we will answer some of those after Joe's presentation. So let's start by clearing up what most people get confused about. Portable Technology Solutions is the name of our company, and we are the developers of TracerPlus and Clearstream RFID software. Clearstream is a user-configurable software that runs on fixed RFID readers. And if you're interested in learning more about fixed RFID solutions, you can visit us at clearstreamrfid.com. We'll also be hosting a webinar next week, and a link to that registration page can be found on clearstreamrfid.com as well. We're a modest company with offices in both New York and New Jersey. While our humble beginnings began with a product called Tracer, developed for Palm devices back in the day, we've successfully scaled the product to what is now known as TracerPlus, which includes compatibility with Windows Mobile, Android, and iOS devices. It incorporates not only barcode scanning features, but RFID and NFC technology as well. But it's our partnerships with hundreds of integrators and end users worldwide who configure all kinds of TracerPlus apps every day that we're most proud of. Each year, we help thousands of businesses of all types save money by converting their paper forms and manual data collection methods into mobile asset tracking, inventory, route accounting, event tracking, and even delivery apps. Just to name a few, TracerPlus is out there tracking pigs and chickens, providing hundreds of inspections and recording countless number of assets worldwide. Affordable to deploy and quick to scale, you'll never get stuck with an antiquated system. As your business evolves and technology evolves, so can your TracerPlus app. Baby steps and small budgets are not a problem. You can start off using a simple TracerPlus app on existing cell phones and tablets, and over time grow into a robust enterprise-class solution. I find it fascinating when we start to compare our older presentations with the new ones we use today. I can see that TracerPlus at its core remains timeless, yet it's always adapting with the latest technology that's out there. This slide never gets old. So whether you're using pen and paper to collect data or nothing at all, I think we can all agree the reason you're here today is to find a better way. A way that will enable your organization to remain in control of your data and provide an easy-to-use system that won't break the bank. We believe TracerPlus is such a system, and I'm excited to share it with you today. The next few slides highlight a few of our customers who did find a better way. You can find these and other testimonials and case studies on our website and within RFID Journal, which, for those of you who don't know, is an online publication geared towards educating those interested in RFID. Arundel is a CNC manufacturer that used to manually track gauges and handwrite inspection forms, which they would then later store in binders. They would spend hours looking through these binders and bad handwriting, only to eventually find wrong information. This would slow down their process and increase losses to their bottom line. With TracerPlus, they were able to create an inspection app that ensured complete and accurate data entry, and were able to lose all those binders. Now, once scanning a barcode, they can instantly look up vital information with 100% accuracy, which increased their production time that impressed their customers, which led to more business, resulting in increased revenue. MCA Tile is an amazing story. They manufacture approximately 18,000 different types of tiles and track over 50,000 pallets of products, all within an 8-acre facility in California. I hope you can see this picture clearly. It's definitely worth 1,000 words. They used to manually, with pen and paper, inventory all those pallets. Each audit would take them 3 days with 8 employees. Now with TracerPlus, it only takes one person 4 hours to complete an inventory. Yep, that's 3 days with 8 employees down to 4 hours with 1 employee. We have a video at TracerPlus.com where they talk about it and demonstrate how they do it. Bike lane's pretty cool too. Herb is the owner of an 8,000 square foot bike shop in Texas. He downloaded TracerPlus one day and configured an RFID app himself. They were literally spending up to a half an hour trying to find a particular bike that they had sold. Looking for merchandise took salespeople off the floor. And for those in retail, you know that's valuable time they could have spent selling needed add-on items. But by the time they got back, the customer was eager to check out and leave the store. Now with TracerPlus, they can find anything they need in seconds, saving valuable time to spend with customers and increase their sales. So I'm guessing you're pretty excited and ready to learn how these guys actually did it. Well, some chose to use our resources and create the apps themselves. We like to refer to them as the MacGyver type, who have the time and resources to learn and develop their TracerPlus skills. While others may not have the time or the resources, chose to use our services to create the apps for them. Either way, the results allowed them to take control and streamline their data collection process, saving hundreds of thousands of dollars while joining our growing community of TracerPlus users worldwide. So let's say you don't have the time or resources to create your own mobile app. Here at PTS, we keep the process pretty simple. You'll start by working side by side with one of our account managers who can quickly determine if TracerPlus is right for you, provide additional information and pricing. Once you've made the commitment to move forward, you're then paired with one of our solution architects who will finalize your scope of work and begin creating your own custom application. They will schedule a time to deliver and train you and others in your company if needed. And from there, you're on your own to start testing the application out in the real world. We can revise and revisit so long as it's all within the scope of work. There wouldn't be any additional charges. And typically within 3 to 4 weeks, you'd have a working application. And what's really cool is we don't lock down the app. So at any time, you can use TracerPlus to make modifications and even create additional apps on your own at no additional charge. Pretty seamless process. Okay, so say you decided to do it yourself. The first step you're going to want to do is grab a sheet of paper or use a Word doc. Jot down some information about the app you want to create. For example, what fields of data do you need to collect? Much like a paper form, you want to know who's completing the form and the day or time in which the form was completed. From there, you may want the user to scan a barcode and enter a quantity. Now, that's a basic app, and TracerPlus is capable of way more. But for today, we'll stick with this example. I've tried to get as many samples on this slide to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. Now ask yourself, what kind of experience do you want the user to have when using the application? Do you want them to not have to think and let the form guide them? Or do you want the user to have control over the data field? Basically, how do you want the app to flow? So in our example, you may want a user to log in with a password, or you may not require a password and simply let them enter the app with a click of an icon. You may want the user to increment scanned quantities as they pull the trigger, instead of manually entering quantities after a cycle count. Perhaps you want them to have the ability to choose. Either way, with TracerPlus, you have the ability to design an app that guides the user or configure one that's more interactive, giving the user the ability to react to certain scenarios that may arise. I hope you get the idea. From there, the next step would be to download and install both TracerPlus Desktop and TracerPlus Connect. Now, TracerPlus Desktop is the software that gets installed on your PC or laptop and is used to create the application. And don't worry, I'm going to review some of the resources available to you in just a bit. TracerPlus Connect is also installed on your PC or laptop and is software used to seamlessly sync the data you collected back to your existing database and Excel sheet. And remember, Joe will be demonstrating both TracerPlus Desktop and TracerPlus Connect, so please stick around. So here's a list of some online resources we talk about all the time, such as user guides available in PDF format, and our knowledge-based articles that are easy to search with keywords, which reveal helpful answers and sometimes step-by-step instructions. All our resources can be accessed from our website at tracerplus.com and are provided to you with quick links in an email you receive soon after you download the trial. We encourage everyone to work with one of our TracerPlus account managers. We are here to help you navigate these free resources, and if we can't find the answer, we'll be sure to get the answer and help you need. If you don't know who your account manager is, simply email our sales department at sales@tracerplus.com and we'll assign one to you. Our YouTube videos are probably our most utilized resource. Some of our videos have thousands of views. The search box, which I tried to highlight with a circle in the screenshot here, is very helpful. For example, if you need to learn more about grid controls or lookups, simply use the search box and videos on the subject will populate. On our playlist catalog, our webinars by subject, which is really helpful when trying to find something quick. And of course, I can't leave this slide without asking you to like a video you liked and subscribe to our channel. Our open office hours are a great way to get classroom-type training twice a week. Simply log on to one of our scheduled go-to meetings, raise your hand, and ask questions. One of our technicians will be on hand to answer questions and guide you to available resources specific to your needs. We also occasionally have users sign in just to listen to other folks. You'd be surprised how much you can learn from other users' questions. Our community forum also opens the door and allows you to engage with other TracerPlus users and learn how others are using the software. And our pre-sales support can be set up by your account manager, typically set up in 2-week intervals. So when you're ready to get started and you may need a little extra help, make sure to reach out to your account manager. Short on time? You may just find the perfect app already built in our online library of sample apps. These applications can be used as is or modified to meet your exact need. A great way to get started. Oh, and it's also important to note when installing TracerPlus to your Android device via the Google Play Store, you'll be all set with about 5 to 6 sample apps to try. And finally, let's say you're moving right along, creating your TracerPlus apps, and all of a sudden you get stuck. You just can't figure out how to do something. Maybe it's printing, maybe it's form navigation, barcode parsing, whatever it is, we have a solution for that. We call it fast track training. You can purchase 2-hour, 4-hour, or 8-hour blocks of time, and you get to work side by side with one of our skilled TracerPlus solution architects. We can even provide a recording that you can refer back to later. So whether you created the app for you or created it for yourself, you'll always want to protect your investment. Our support plans are a great way to do that. Not only will you have access to our support team here in the US, but license security should anything happen to your device. Upgrades are also included and a must for any deployment that needs security when operating systems are upgraded across all devices, PCs, and laptops. Working with our account managers and our pre-sales support team is a great way to experience how our support system works. So contact us and schedule some time to talk to one of our account managers. We'll review your project, talk about those resources available, and help you develop next steps. We also have a network of partners nationwide, worldwide, who can provide complete solutions for our customers. So please call or email and let us know how we can help. Now it's time to watch Joe as he demonstrates TracerPlus and TracerPlus Connect. And please don't forget to stick around for questions at the end and our quick survey.
Thank you, Kristen. That was
You're
very
welcome.
useful information.
Thanks.
Hello all, and welcome to the demonstration part of the webinar. So I'm just going to show my screen here. And we will get started with actually creating a mobile app from start to finish and using Connect to sync our data collected on the device back to a database. So right now what you're looking at is our TracerPlus desktop tool, which is a free download, free to use. You even have access to our online sample apps, or what we call our solution center. So you can actually download these apps directly into desktop, use them as is, or change them to meet your needs. They can also be a good starting point for you if you're looking to use a specific type of feature, like grid controls or lookups. You may be able to get that info from some of our sample apps to see how those are actually implemented and then use those in your own mobile app. So the first thing I'm going to do here is create a new project. And we are presented with our first session. So a session is basically a form with a data table behind it. So you can actually have up to 32 different sessions or forms on the device at the same time, or 32 sessions per project, we like to call it. So you can do a lot of different applications with that single project. So I'm going to create our project name here. I'm going to do a file scanning app. So I'll call it File Tracker. Then we can select what platform we're going to create it for. In this case, I am doing it on an Android device. So I will choose Android. I will jump to session 1 and we'll say we're going to do scanning files. We'll say scan files. Then we can define the different fields that we want to collect during this process. So in this case, we may want to start with the date that we're currently collecting on, and maybe a location. That could be a building, a room, you know, whatever you may want to set as your location. Maybe if we're scanning into boxes or drawers, we could say box or drawer number. And then lastly, the file/folder number. Then I can remove any excess fields that we don't need. Now we can start defining some of these fields. So our date would be a date time data type. And once we select that, we can choose from different formats. So we do offer different formats for different regions. In this case, I'm just going to choose our default. And maybe we want our time as well. Next, our location. We would want this to be something they could pick from a drop-down. So I'm going to set this as a type or a field type of drop-down. Once I do that, you'll see a drop-down options tab appear. And now I can actually enter some locations here, or I can actually get this information from a table using our TracerPlus Connect software to sync that over. In this case, I'm just going to enter some things here. We'll just enter a couple rooms. Then we'll jump to our box drawer number field. Since this will typically be a barcode scan or manually keyed entry, we're going to leave the field type for this and the next field as text. Now let's define how we're actually going to control the flow of the application once the user starts entering data. So the first thing, we don't want the app to start on the date field, as that will be an auto-populated field from the device. So if I just jump to the advanced section real quick, we can see a start on field setting. So we can change this to start on the location field. So that way, as soon as we open the form, we're starting at the field that we want them to first select data to. I can also change our key field to our file and folder number. So once we're in the location field, where do we want the cursor to focus? So that's where we define these settings within the After Scan tab. So consider an after scan, what we call an after scan event could be a barcode scan, a drop-down box selection, a keyboard entry followed by the enter key, radio button selection, checkbox selection, so anything that would trigger what we call an after scan event. So in this case, we can change the go-to fields from location to go to box number or box drawer number, which it already is set to. So that way, once they select the location, it jumps right down to the next field that they want to enter. Box number drawer number now goes to the file and folder number field. And then finally, the file and folder number, we have it going back to date right now. But let's actually set this to auto submit. So that way we could select our location, select our drawer, and then start just scanning a bunch of files that we're going to place in there. So in that case, we would want it to go back to itself. So we'll change that to file and folder number. One other thing we want to do in the after scan for the other two fields is uncheck the clear on submit. So what that means is once we submit the record, it's not going to clear these fields and retain them for use in the following records. So that is very useful for repetitive data entry, so you don't have to keep entering a location and a box drawer number if you're going to keep placing files into that same location. So that way we can select it once and then just scan, 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 and then we've scanned a bunch of files into that particular location. So that is pretty much it for the field settings configuration. Now we want to design how this is actually going to look once we deploy it to our connected device. So right here, it gives you a blank canvas you can start with, or you can create a default form, which I'm going to do. So that it'll just give you a default form here. That's very generic looking, so you can definitely tweak this to your liking using our very intuitive drag and drop environment here. So in my case, I'm using an Android device, so I'm going to choose a larger screen resolution. I'm just going to choose the 480 by 720. And it will actually scale that to the size of my outer dimensions of the form. Also keep in mind that with Android and iOS, the form will auto scale to the width of the device. If you have this auto scale feature turned on, which it is by default. So that way, if you develop the form for a certain screen size, it can scale to a larger or smaller screen size based on the width. So let's tidy up this form a little bit. We can also hide these tab controls. So I'm just going to drag that off of the form. And then we can choose to hide that tab border. Then we can click all of our fields and start to align them using our alignment controls. Make everything the same size, make them lined up correctly. And we can do the same for the labels. And what I'm doing here is holding down the Shift key and then clicking on the controls. That will allow you to select and apply multiple properties to the same, or I should say apply a single property to multiple controls at the same time, or actually move them around together. So now we can actually change some of the coloring here. I'll make this go with a dark gray background, and then we can change our label controls here to dark gray as well, with some white text. And maybe we want to bold the scan files, maybe make it a little bit larger. We have full control over some of the font settings here. Let's go ahead and move our record count over. And lastly, let's change our buttons down here. We'll change those to a different color. We'll go with a blue. That's a little bright. Let's go with a maroon type color with white text, and we'll make those bold. One thing to note, since we enabled that auto submit for a file folder, we technically don't need the submit button, so I can actually just get rid of it. Now we're left with our done, which exits the form, and clear all, which will clear all the fields. So I'll just slide that next to it. And now what I want to do is deploy this to my connected device. So I do have an Android device connected. So to do so, I just click on the build deploy. We have the opportunity to change platforms here. Or, if we selected our platform when creating the project, we shouldn't have to select that again. Then we can choose the appropriate method for deployment. So you're presented with several options here. The most common is the MTP, or the Media Transfer Protocol. So if you use that, you should be able to see your connected devices via USB. You can also deploy this project remotely using the deploy server. So what this does is create a QR code that can be scanned on the device with all the information needed to access this particular instance of TracerPlus Desktop. So it's able then to download this project, over the web using Wi-Fi or WAN to actually get this project. Since my device is connected, I'm just going to use the MTP method. And here is my device. I'm actually viewing remotely a physical device using a Chrome add-in called Visor. So this is a nice and useful tool for actually viewing your device screen and being able to control it from your PC, which is helpful when creating the app or needing to take screenshots for user guides and manuals or instructions for your users. So here's our session. It's called Scan Files. If we go into it, you'll see that the cursor is now focused on location. In this case, our keyboard popped up, but if we actually wanted that to hide, we can go back to our location field, and under the hide keyboard, we could say on focus, so that way the keyboard doesn't pop up unless we physically tap into that field, which is something you may want to utilize if you are using drop downs or barcode scanning, so that way that annoying keypad pop-up doesn't get in the way. So I'll change all of those to on focus. and we'll just deploy those changes. So there they are, no more keyboard pop-up. If I click on the drop-down, here's the rooms that I entered. So if I enter a room, we're now dropped down to the next field, so I could actually scan or key in. In this case, I'll just key it in from my keyboard. Say drawer 1, and then file 101. And then as I hit enter, you'll see that that record auto-submitted and our record count jumped to 1. I could do 2, 103, 104. And then if I were to actually change the location, we could say now we're going to room 202, maybe we're in drawer 2, and we could say 105, 106, 107. Now I can also use the clear all button to clear these fields if I wanted to just reset everything and start from scratch, or I can hit done, click this view data option, and then there's the records of information that we just collected. There's our date, there's our location, our box drawer number, and our file and folder number. So this is residing locally on the device currently. So now the next step would be to actually get this data off of the device. And we can do that utilizing our TracerPlus Connect software. So if I jump over to that, so this is our TracerPlus Connect software. And what I'm going to do is create a new project. And the first thing we need to do is add a profile. So a profile would be a grouping of sync processes that can be triggered by a single button press. Or there's also a live profile where you can actually operate in a real-time mode, posting data directly to a database and vice versa, without actually storing data locally on the device first. In this case, I will just do a sync profile. And one thing we always recommend is to link your desktop project to this Connect profile, as it makes it a lot easier to configure. So if I just click our folder, we'll go to projects. Let me just see what I named that. So we named it File Tracker. Let's look for that project. File Tracker, there it is. We select our TPP and then hit Create Profile. So we're just started with a blank profile named Profile 1. So now we can name this. We'll call it Sync from Device. As you may want another separate profile called Sync to Device that could potentially sync your locations from an Excel sheet or a database table back to the device's drop-down field. You can actually control those syncs separately by adding them in different profiles. So once I actually have the profile created, I'm going to add a sync process to it. And we can call this one Sync File Scan. So we need to set up a source of where the data is coming from, and then the destination of where the data is going to end up. In this case, we're coming from the device, so we're going to select TracerPlus. Once we select TracerPlus, because we tied our desktop project to this, we only see the scan file session. If we didn't associate this project, we would just see a list of 32 generic sessions, which will still work, but it's going to make things more difficult when you're doing your mapping. Next, we have our destination of where we're putting this data. So I'm going to sync this to our sample access database that we include with Connect. So I'm going to choose ODBC, TracerPlus Connect sample, and then I can choose what table I want to sync this data to. So in this case, I will just sync it to our 5-field sample, but you'll also notice that we do have some other tables in here that are strictly meant for use with some of our Solution Center projects. So if you grab some of those projects, you can point them to this sample database and actually see how it works with real data. I'm going to choose our 5 field. And once we do that, we'll see some mappings appear below. So the 5 fields is a generic database, so you're only going to see fields 1, 2, 3, 4. However, on the TracerPlus side, you see our actual field names that we created in our project. So if your database table had field names, you can see how much easier it is to actually tie the field name to the field that you want in the database. Now I can choose the options. So we look at destination options. We have the post type setting. So here we can choose how we want this data to post to the destination when it's synced. Excuse me. So we can append that data and just keep adding it. We can overwrite, or we can update based on some value. We have 2 options for update. We can update existing. That means it'll update if it finds it and ignore it if it doesn't. Or we can update it if it exists and add it if it doesn't, which is that append if not found. In this case, we're just going to append. And usually when appending, you should typically remove the data from the device. So if we look under our source options, we select delete after transfer. So that way on a successful sync, we remove that data from the device so that we don't end up with duplicate records. So now I'm going to save this. So we'll call it file tracker. And we have a few other screens we can look at here. One is synchronize. Keep in mind, if you're using Android or iOS, these sync buttons up here do not work. Those are only for Windows Mobile or CE connected devices, and those are only for a USB connection to this physical PC. Otherwise, you should be using sync buttons added on the device itself, which I will show you how to do shortly. And if we look at our data viewer, this is going to give us a little snapshot view into the actual table we're syncing to. Let me just clear out my existing records in here. So the next step is, how do we tell this device to sync this process? I'm going to jump back over to desktop. And if we go to the project tab, you'll see that we have a connect section. So this is where we define where we're actually going to sync this data to. So I'm going to set up a host. So that's going to be a PC or server that would actually be running this TracerPlus Connect software. I'm just going to enter an IP address in here. And this is the default port. So if anyone is having firewall issues, make sure that this port is open. Some other settings here, live sessions, that's if you're doing the live mode that I was referring to earlier with the live profile. Or you can set up sync timers to run every so many minutes, or apply sync conditions. We're just going to keep it simple and add our host here. So note the ID of host ID 1. So now what I want to do is add a sync button on the device. So there's 2 different ways you can do this. You can either create a dedicated session for syncs. This is very useful if you're going to have multiple sync buttons that do different things. Or if it's something as simple as this, you may just want to add the sync button right to the form. I'm going to click on button, then I'll place it on the form. And we want to set a button action for this button. In this case, we're looking for a do sync. And you'll notice that once we select a button action, different properties will be available to set. These are going to vary depending on that action that is selected. So in the case of a do sync, we have a sync host ID and a sync profile ID. So the host ID is going to be this host that we just defined, which is ID 1. The profile ID is going to be the profile in the Connect software that we want this sync button to trigger. So if we jump to Connect, go back to Configure, note the profile ID is 1. So now we will set this as 1 as well. And we will also size this. Make it maybe a different color. And we'll call it sync. So now what we're saying is once we press this button, it's going to look to that host, and then once it finds it, it's going to trigger profile 1. So if we added a couple more sync processes within this first profile, it would run all of those with that profile. So let's go ahead and deploy these changes to our device. All right, once we click on it, there's our sync button. I also noticed our form was a little short, or actually I should say a little tall for the device, so we can actually shrink this a little bit. There, that's better. So now what we can do is actually press this sync button and have it sync these 7 records to our sample table. If I, excuse me, bring up Connect, if we go to the synchronize page, you'll see that we also have an activity monitor. You can also use this to view activity as you sync with your device. Now, if I press this sync button, you'll see it happens quick, especially in Android. It synced those 7 records over. And if we go to our data viewer and refresh, there's those 7 records that we just scanned. That was pretty easy and pretty quick to set up a simple files tracking application and then sync it to an Access database. You can also sync this to SQL Server, MySQL, Oracle, Excel workbooks, text files, pretty much anything ODBC compliant. So these tools are all available for free trial. They can be downloaded on our website to test for yourself and see how they work. And then I'll just quickly show our Solution Center. So if you click on Samples, you'll see that we offer applications in 8 different categories. Asset tracking, once you click that, you'll get a brief summary of the different apps that are available to you to download. So for example, RFID Asset Quick Scan. This is meant for rapid reading of RFID tags using Zebra RFID devices. So you can view screenshots of what the app will look like with a brief description of what it does. You know, you can click next and then import that directly into desktop. And then you're free to now deploy this app to your device or modify it as you see fit. But that's pretty much what I wanted to cover today in the demonstration, just to show you how quick you can get up and running with TracerPlus. So I guess I will pass it back over to Kristen and we'll start addressing some questions.
Thanks, Joe. That was great. I actually learned a lot. Okay, so I guess I'll start off with taking some of the sales questions, and then Joe can finish up with some of the more technical questions. Let's see here. How is TracerPlus licensed? So there's basically 3 components. TracerPlus Desktop is the software used to create your applications, and it's free to use. Anyone can download it, create applications, and you can share those applications through a file export. In order to operate the application you created, you need to install a TracerPlus mobile client license directly to the device. This, along with TracerPlus Connect, is sold per device. There's a one-time license fee and yearly support contracts. We also offer volume discounting as well. What are the limitations with the trial version? So the main limitation is the number of records you can sync or export. So let's say you scan 20 assets. Only 5 of those will sync back to your database. And you can find more information on the trial version in our user guide, and there's also a knowledge base article on the subject. And there's no time restriction. It's just the number of records that you can export. Let's see. When will iOS be available? iOS is available actually and is already being deployed. I would contact your account manager for more information on that. And what type of support do I get with pre-sales support? Well, once you've worked with your account manager and we've gathered all the useful information about your project, such as the devices you're trialing, what the database type you're using, and what kind of application you're looking to create, we're able to set up your account with some pre-sales support. This enables you to create support tickets, which enters our queue and is directed to one of our pre-sales support technicians. They typically email you back with helpful resources, and if none are available, they may even provide step-by-step instructions on how to do what it is you're looking to do. And don't forget about open office hours available twice a week. That's a great resource. And I think I mentioned we typically provide pre-sale support in 1 or 2 week intervals. So be sure to set aside some time to work on your application before signing up for that. And maintaining communication with your account manager is also helpful. And Joe, I think that's it on the sales side. Do you have any technical questions that you got?
Yeah, it looks like we have a couple here. First one is asking if we have a YouTube video on how to connect it to a SQL Server database. I believe we do have a video on that. So we just go to our website, let's look at our training videos, and then connect. We have right here, share data with your mobile workforce using SQL Server. So you may want to check out that video, but just to sort of show you now, if we go back to configure, as long as you created your Windows data source for your SQL Server database, you should be able to access it in this data source dropdown. So I do have some SQL stuff in here. For example, our Clearstream RFID software, we actually have a sample SQL that I use here. And once we click that, we just enter our login information. And then we'll see our table, or tables, depending on what you have. It should show tables used and stored procedures. And then you should be able to map to those. You know, I could just reset those. So these are the different fields within that particular SQL table. So it's pretty much the same type of setup as you saw in Access here, or it would be similar using MySQL or Oracle. So they're all very identical in terms of configuring the mapping side. The only thing you have to do on your end is create the data source for it in Windows. All right, we have another question here on if you can set it to auto sync on every record scan. So that may be, there's a few ways you could go about that. You could actually just operate in the real-time live mode, so that way it just posts as you're scanning. That may be the recommended solution for that. As I don't know that you'd want to just do a standard batch sync after every record post, but you could set it up to click a sync button after you submit if you wanted to go that route. But I would recommend using live mode in that case. And this will tie into another question about store and forward. If the device loses connectivity and you're in a live mode, it will store the record locally on the device until you regain access, in which it will then send it over to the database behind the scenes. We have another question here. The process you're demonstrating right now is identical to what I do on the device and term as masking. Does TPOS still retain the ability to manipulate the session field data on the device? I'm not quite sure what you mean there. I don't know if you're asking if we still have field settings available on the device. We do not. Those are no longer exposed on the device. But I think in Windows there may be a way to access those if you just edit the launcher to show the field settings and session settings. But you would be best served reaching out to our support team for that. Question on white label. I don't know if you want to talk about that, Kristen.
Sure. So TracerPlus Desktop is the free design tool, again, that you can use to create mobile applications. And you'll notice that when you do create them, you'll see TracerPlus on the top left of all your applications. We have a product called TracerPlus Desktop Publisher that allows you to brand your application. So you don't see TracerPlus, but perhaps what you want the user to see. And we have videos on demonstrating how that works on our YouTube channel. So anyone that's interested in that, go to YouTube, search the search box, Publisher, I think it'll come up. And if you have any questions, again, reach out to your account manager.
Yep, and just to show it a little bit, this is the Publisher section. Once you register for Publisher, you'll see that these fields become unlocked. So then you can add your own images, launcher images, company logos, app images, app icons, product ID, which can be used to generate your own unique registration codes, what you want to call it, and your author information. Then you can build specific, APKs or CAD files, depending on what device you're using to actually deploy these projects. And then the customer is also asking about the deployment process for iOS devices.
Sure. So again, get with your account manager regarding iOS, but in short, the deployment's a little different. You have to become a member of the Apple Enterprise Development Program and deploy the TracerPlus apps through their platform.
And we have a question on if we can show how to report out data. If you're referring to actually generating reports off of data collected, that's not something we handle. We enable you to get the data from the mobile device to the database of your choice. We don't sort of tie you into a specific backend system. So the end user is then responsible for running any type of reporting off of that data.
Okay, I think that looks like the end of the questions, and we're actually right at 4 o'clock. So I don't want to keep anybody. If we didn't get to your question, you know, keep putting them in there, and we'll certainly reach out to you and answer them. In the meantime, we're going to close out this webinar. I want to thank everybody for joining us. And once I do close it out, I think that quick 3-question survey is going to pop up. If you could please stick around and just answer those, it's really helpful. And again, we appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you and speaking with you. Bye.